If you own a property in Los Angeles, some of the most expensive mistakes you can make don't look very expensive when you make them. Choosing the wrong tenant, skipping a rent increase, putting off repairs and maintenance, making a deal with the tenant without actually understanding the law. And sometimes you don't find out what that mistake really cost you until 10 or 20 years later when you got a major tenant problem or you're finally ready to sell your building. And sometimes you don't find out what that mistake really cost you until 10 or 20 years later when you've got a major tenant problem or you're finally ready to sell your building. I've been selling LA real estate for 40 years and I've seen these mistakes come back to haunt many of my apartment sellers and clients. So today I want to go through some of the costliest mistakes I see Los Angeles landlords often make, and more importantly, how to avoid them. I've been selling Los Angeles real estate for 40 years, and I've seen these mistakes come back to haunt apartment owners. So today I want to go through some of the costliest mistakes I see LA landlords making, and more importantly, how to avoid them. Mistake number one, poor tenant screening. I'm putting tenant screening first because in Los Angeles, the tenant you choose today could still be your tenant 10, 20, or even 30 years from now. This is one decision you absolutely must get right. And before I go any further, I want to give a shout out to Dennis Block. Dennis is one of the best known landlord attorneys in Southern California, and I followed his landlord tenant information for years. I recently watched one of Dennis's videos about big mistakes landlords often make, and tenant screening was number one on his list. But here's what I really liked. Dennis doesn't just say screen your tenants, he actually provides landlords with a written rental leasing requirements form before he even takes an application. I'm going to put this up on the screen because I think every landlord should take a look at it. Okay, here's Dennis's form. The rental leasing requirements in accordance with California leasing laws. He gives this to any potential tenant before he accepts an application from them. Number one, he spells out the application process. All adult applicants 18 years and older must complete a rental application and pay the applicable non-refundable application fee. Also, he will need identification and proof of income for all applicants. Income requirements. Gross monthly income must be at least 3 times the rent, and acceptable forms of income verification include pay stubs, tax returns, or bank statements. Credit check will be conducted on all applicants. Minimum credit score of 700 or higher is required, but individual circumstances will be considered. Negative factors such as bankruptcies, collections may impact eligibility. Rental history, a minimum of 2 years rental history is preferred. Applicants should not have a history of eviction or lease violations, and applicants must provide proof of rental payment for the last 6 months from their current landlord. Pretty smart. Background check. A criminal background check will be performed on all applicants. Certain convictions may disqualify applicants, especially those related to property crimes or violent offenses. Section 8 applications. We welcome Section 8 applicants because it's illegal to not consider or rent to Section 8 applicants. Please note that we will not rely solely on credit reports as your ability to pay is essential. Occupancy guidelines. The number of occupants permitted is based on the number of bedrooms in the apartment. Our guidelines are 2 per bedroom plus 1. So for example, a 2-bedroom unit, we will allow a maximum of 5 persons. Other factors will be considered. Ability to maintain a unit and conduct towards other tenants. So this is something that Dennis has prepared, and very, very smart. You can find this pre-application guideline for giving to prospective tenants on Dennis's website at evict123.com. I will have a link down below where you can get to Dennis's websites, and I recommend get on Dennis's newsletter. He has all kinds of great information, free forms. His leases are great. He really is a very good resource, and you should have his website bookmark on your computer and phone. If you own rental property in Los Angeles and you're dealing with SCEP, REAP, tenant issues, or rising costs, you're not alone, and you need to understand your options. I put together a landlord website and a landlord guide to SCEP and REAP inspections to walk you through all of your options. Go to DerrickRuiz.com, scroll down to start here, and choose your situation. Whether you want to sell an apartment building, you're dealing with SCEP inspections, REAP violations, you want to know about tenant laws and evictions, you want to know more about insurance and rising costs and what you can do, how to avoid habitability and liability risk, If you want to know more about the Section 8 lawsuits and stuff that's happening, go here. And if you want more information on rent control and tenant restrictions, check out this information on my website. Very helpful for landlords. And let's get back to the video. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Okay, mistake number 2, not knowing which laws apply to your property. The second mistake is assuming you just know the rules. This is LA. You can't just say, my property is rent controlled. Well, what kind of rent control are you under? Is it subject to the City of LA Rent Stabilization Ordinance, RSO? Is it governed by statewide rules such as AB 1482? Is there another local ordinance? What city is a property actually located? When was it built? How many units are there? Are there exemptions? And I've seen owners make decisions based on something they heard from another landlord or something that was true 10 years ago. Dennis talks about this extensively in his videos. An owner buys a property and thinks, I'll just give everybody 60-day notice, or I'm selling so the tenants have to leave. No, it doesn't necessarily work that way. In fact, during Dennis's Q&A, somebody asked him about selling a rent-controlled property with a long-term tenant. And Dennis explained that selling the property itself did not give that owner grounds to evict the tenant. So before you raise the rent, terminate a tenancy, negotiate a buyout, move somebody in, or make another major tenant decision, find out exactly which laws apply to that particular property. And if it's a legal question, get the answer from a qualified landlord attorney like Dennis Block. Mistake number 3, mishandling tenant buyouts and vacancies. This one I see from the real estate brokerage side all the time. An owner calls me and says, Derrick, I'm thinking about selling my building, but first I have to get the tenants out. My first question is why? Maybe getting a particular unit vacant is a great idea. Maybe it's worth a lot of money to the buyer, but maybe it isn't. So let's say you've got a long-term tenant and you think it's going to take $50,000 to $75,000 to get a voluntary buyout. Before you spend that money, shouldn't we find out what that vacancy is actually worth? If that unit, getting that vacant unit adds $150,000 to the value of the property, then we have something to talk about. But if it only adds $30,000 and you paid $75,000 to accomplish it, obviously that wasn't a very good business decision. And remember, a tenant buyout is not simply handing somebody a check and saying goodbye. There can be very specific legal requirements surrounding tenant buyout agreements depending on what city you're in. Like in Los Angeles, there is a whole application process. They get a 30-day cool-off period and it takes 60 days to buy somebody out. So first 2 pieces of information you need. First, what are you legally allowed to do? Second, does it make financial sense? That's where somebody who understands apartment buildings values comes in. Somebody like me, a broker who sells apartment buildings. Now, I've sold fully occupied buildings. I've sold buildings that had 100% vacancies. I've sold buildings needing substantial repairs and buildings with serious compliance problems like code violation and properties that are in REAP. You don't automatically have to solve every problem before you sell, but you need to find out from a broker like myself what your property is worth as is first. Then you can have enough information to make some decisions. Mistake number 4, ignoring repairs and habitability issues. Here's where a small problem can become a very expensive problem. A tenant tells you there's a leak, but you put it off. The leak continues. Now you've got water intrusion. Maybe you've got mold. Now the tenant is complaining. Maybe they call the city. Now the Los Angeles Housing Department is involved. Maybe you have code violations. And depending on what happens from there, you could end up with a habitability lawsuit or potentially dealing with having your property go into REAP. Dennis's advice on this is pretty straightforward. If there's a legitimate repair problem, deal with it and document what you did. If the tenant tells you on Tuesday there's a plumbing problem and you have the plumbing there on Wednesday, make sure you keep a record of it. That's something I emphasized in an earlier video I did on landlord mistakes. Document everything. Because 6 months later, you don't want an argument over whether the tenant ever told you about the problem or whether you ever fixed it. And this becomes particularly important when you want to sell. A buyer is going to want to know what's going on with the property. So will their building inspector, possibly their lender. And if there are city violations, they're certainly going to want to know about these, and it could derail your escrow. So take care of legitimate problems while they're manageable. Mistake number 5, not having an inspection and SCEP strategy. Another costly mistake is not knowing what's happening inside your building, what's going on inside your units. I've talked to owners who haven't seen the inside of any of their building in 20 years. Now they're getting ready to sell. We finally see the unit and I go, whoa, what's going on here? Maybe there's unauthorized occupants. Maybe the tenants made alterations. Maybe there's water damage. Maybe they're a smoker. Maybe there's pet urine. Maybe there's maintenance problems nobody ever knew about. You need to know the condition of the asset you own. Dennis recommends periodically inspecting units where legally permitted and documenting situations when an owner attempts to obtain lawful access. And in the city of LA, we've got another issue, SCEP, Systematic Code Enforcement Program. If you own apartments in LA, you should understand how SCEP inspections work and have a plan for them. You don't want the first time you're finally seriously thinking about the condition of your building to be when the SCEP inspector shows up. I've dealt with SCEP issues. I've sold property with SCEP violations. I've also sold properties that were in REAP for many, many years, and the owner was not collecting any rents. I can tell you, once a maintenance issue becomes a regulatory issue, everything gets more complicated and it gets more expensive. Now, know what's going on with your building, maintain it, document it, and understand the inspection rules that apply to your building. Mistake number 6, letting the financial side of the property drift. The last one is really a combination of something Dennis talks about and something I constantly see as a broker. Dennis is very strong about landlords taking their yearly lawful rent increases available to them. And I understand why some landlords don't. Maybe you got a tenant that's been there for 15 years. They're nice, they pay on time, they're like family, they never bother you. Maybe they bring you cookies at Christmas. So you don't raise the rent. Then 1 year becomes 5 and 5 years becomes 10, and suddenly that apartment is dramatically below market values. Let's use this example. Suppose you own 6 units and each unit is $400 under market value. That's $2,400 a month. That's $28,000 a year. Now look at it from my side of the table when I'm trying to sell your building with below market rents. When an investor buys an apartment building, income matters. They're looking at the rent roll. They're looking at the expenses. They're looking at the net operating income. They're looking at what kind of return are they going to be getting on their investment. So years of missed lawful increases can affect more than your monthly cash flow. They can affect the economics of your building when it goes time to sell it. Obviously, I'm not telling anybody to make illegal rent increases. You have to follow whatever laws apply to your particular property. But this leads into a bigger mistake, not treating your building as an investment. At least once in a while, sit down and ask, what's my property worth today? How much equity do I have? What return am I actually earning on that equity? Could I improve that return? Should I refinance? Should I keep it? Should I sell? Would a 1031 exchange make sense? Would I rather own something more passive? Or is this building exactly where I want my money? And sometimes the answer is keep the building. That's perfectly fine. But make that conscious investment decision. Don't own something for another 10 years simply because you've already owned it for 20. So those are some of the costly mistakes I see landlords make. Again, a shout out to Dennis Block to inspire me to revisit this important subject. I'll put Dennis's information below, including where you can find his landlord resources and rental leasing requirements form. And there's one thing I'll leave you with this. Don't wait until you're ready to sell before you start thinking about these things. Screen tenants carefully. Know which rental laws apply to your property. Take care of maintenance problems. Know what's happening inside your units. Watch your rents and your income. And before you start spending a lot of money buying tenants out, remodeling units, or trying to solve every problem because you're thinking about selling, find out what your building is worth as is before you spend any money or make any decisions. Once you find out what your building's worth as is, then you can make an informed decision about if anything is worth changing. Now, if you own an apartment building in LA or Southern California and you're wondering what it's worth, whether you should keep it, refinance it, or sell it, give me a call, send me a text, or shoot me an email. I have 40 years experience helping apartment owners navigate the difficult Los Angeles real estate market, whether it comes to how to avoid SCEP inspections, how to properly screen tenants, how to get out of REAP, or how to sell your building for top dollar. I've done it all. And if you're an apartment owner, subscribe to this channel. I cover SCEP, REAP, rent control, tenant issues, insurance issues, how to avoid getting sued by your tenants, how to screen tenants, and all the things you need to know when owning or selling apartments here in Los Angeles. Now, quick little disclaimer, this video is for general informational purposes only and is not legal, tax, or financial advice. Laws and regulations change, so always consult the appropriate qualified professional regarding your specific situation. Again, this is Derrick Ruiz with eXp Realty, 40 years selling real estate here in Los Angeles. I love what I do. I love working with landlords and investors. I have a lot of information. Check out my website at derrickruiz.com. I have tons of information, guides, all kinds of different topics to help you run your building, how to operate it properly, and how to stay out of trouble. And of course, how to sell your building for top dollar. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. This is Derrick Ruiz. Talk to you soon.